For more Magic the Gathering resources, check out my friends at paperchampion.net and Kitchen Table MTG. Hey everybody, this is Tao at The Forge, and recently I had the opportunity to introduce some new players to the game of Magic, and it got me thinking about, what are some advice that I would give to people who want to get players into the game. The thing is, Magic needs to grow because you always have people leaving, and so, you always have to get people coming back into the game or returning in order to keep the game thriving, and it's just good for everybody. Overall, there's, I think, some strategies that you can use and things that you can do to help get people into the game. And one of the key things is that the person's first experience with the game is really going to color their response. So if they have like a really bad first experience, they're probably not going to try again. They might just say, "Oh, that game sucked," or something like that. And it's difficult to, once they've had that bad experience, to get them back into it. So I think it's really important for us as a community to be welcoming and, helpful and everything for new players. So here's some things that, like I was doing with some of these new players. Keep in mind, a lot of these new players, they're like young teenagers. They don't have like a lot of money to get into the game. So to say like, hey, just spend like $400 and you'll get a decent deck and standard, that's not really a reasonable thing. But anyways, let's start at the beginning. First thing I want to talk about is, I want to say, let them come to you. Right? So Magic is an awesome game, but really, if you just go around, everyone's like, let's try Magic. Like, it's kind of a turnoff because you're coming on too strong, right? Like, there's people who are like, oh, come on, I want to really play. Let's play. Like, it's just, it's too intimidating, like, because you're just coming on too strong. So, let them come to you. If they express interest, invite them over to watch, and say, hey, I'll show you a game. Do you want to try one out or something like that? And, let them like come slowly to it. Otherwise, like, you're just going to freak them out. The other thing is that, remember, Magic's not for everybody. Like, there's some people who just don't like this sort of thing. They don't want games where they have to think. Like, it's people who like to play, like, I like to play this game too, like Pop-O-Matic Trouble or Frustration or something like that. But, they just want to roll dice and move their pieces around or something like that. And that's fine. Like, there's not everybody that just wants to play really cerebral games, like, where you're thinking and have strategy and stuff all the time. So, if your friend or your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, like, isn't interested, don't try and push it on them, right? Like, they're just not going to have a good time. And, eventually if they're interested, then they'll get into it with you. But, don't try and force it or insist that they play on it. Anyways, one of the things, as I was mentioning earlier, is that, like, a lot of players don't have a ton of money, and they're willing to invest some money into the game, but they don't want to put like hundreds of dollars into something that they're not sure about. So what I do is I let them play with one of my decks. Now, I'm kind of fortunate that I have, like, I don't know, probably at least 15 modern decks, including like Lantern Control and Merfolk and, Burn and Elves and stuff like that. So it's kind of nice. And what I do is I let them play with one of my decks. Now, it's important to choose the right deck for them, all right? Because a new player to the game doesn't know anything about Magic, right? So what I always do is I always start off with Collected Company Elves. And the reason why is, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that Coco Elves, it feels like what you expect Magic to feel like. It's like creatures, it's like fantasy elves, coming out. And the mechanics for Collected Company Elves is actually quite simple. It's like, play an elf, tap them for mana, play another elf, play a Elvish Archdruid, and then over time you can go into, like, work with them and show them how the different mechanics work. What I always do is I always play the first match or two with the hands open, meaning that we play with our hands on the table so we can see what each other has. And what I do is I kind of coach them through, like, kind of a mock game. So I'll say, like, let's play this Nettle Sentinel and a Heritage Druid. Okay, we can tap for this, get some mana, play a creature, it untaps your Nettle Sentinel, now you can tap again, and so on and so forth. So it gives them like a kind of an easy mechanic, and they can see like the board flooding like with all these elves, and it actually makes them feel pretty good about it. You know, it's just a good experience. Like Coco Elves is just a fun deck to play, and it's not overly complicated to play that deck. The other thing is that you should choose a deck that is going to be fun to play against. So I always choose a deck that's competitive with elves, but not going to blow it out of the water, and one that's like actually fun to play against. So I'll pick something like mono red goblins, or you know, something like that. Or a good one is actually Desolator Magic's Beholder Alpha. That's a decent deck to play someone against. You know, it's not like a killer deck. Like Relentless Rats is okay as well. Like it's not, you know, it's competitive, but it's not like going to just destroy them. And definitely do not play decks that like are just gonna like destroy them. Okay, so don't pull out like your full-on Jund deck, you know, your Lantern Control, you know, your you know, like something that's just like your 8 racks or things like that. Like those ones are not fun to play against, you know. And you're just like, if your intent is to just like bully the new player and make yourself feel good, like, you know, to, you know, at the expense of a new player, then okay, I guess you're being a dick. But you know, the whole point is to get the person to want to play again. And you don't want to, like, I'm not saying to throw the game and let them win, but you know, like you're giving them like an easy deck to play with, and you should give them like a similar opponent to play against. So Elves versus Goblins is actually a pretty good one. It's like, you know, it feels like what you would expect Magic to feel like. Right? Another good one, actually, a decent one, is like Elves versus Mill or something like that. And you can introduce this new mechanic as well. And most students actually really like it. They're like, oh, it's like kind of like a race. Like, can you get rid of all their cards before their creatures kill you? Most of the time, Elves are going to beat that. You know, so you're at a disadvantage, but really, like, you're trying to get the person to like the game. So like I said, don't throw the game, but, you know, give them a deck that's actually going to be advantageous. Do not give them, like, I was saying, don't give yourself Lantern Control, but don't give them Lantern Control either, right? Don't give them something like, you know, like Tron or something like that, or like these, like, you know, like counter, like heavy counters decks and stuff like that. Like Blue-Black Fairies is a really bad deck for a player to start with, because there's just so many interactions and so many triggers that keep going on. Norn Sisters is actually like it looks fun, but there's a lot of different ETB triggers that are happening, and new players can't keep track of those things, you know, or they have a really hard time with it. So don't do that. Like those decks, like start them off with something really simple, straightforward. All right. I always, like I said, I always let them play with one of my decks. I try and be enthusiastic about it. Like I said, we play hands open so we can see what each other has. And I talk about, like, you know, like, should you play this one or this one? And I'll say, like, what do you think? And, you know, we'll talk about the different choices, and, you know, saying, like, if you knew that I had this card, what would you play? And so on and so forth. Invariably, they're going to ask, like, well, how do you know, like, what to expect? And the real answer is just experience. Once you get used to it, you know, you can see someone, you know, if they're playing, like, turn 2 Dark Confidant into, like, a Liliana of the Veil, then, you know, and then into Tarmogoyf, you know they're playing Jund, right? Like, you know, it just, there's certain cards that you get used to seeing, and you know the archetype that's coming out. Like a turn 1 Aether Vial is probably Merfolk, right? So, anyways, so be kind to them. You know, don't give them something that's too difficult. You know, like talk them through it, like kind of think speak, like talk about how you're going through it, and go at their pace. Right? Do not draft. All right. So like everyone like likes to draft. I love to draft, but the problem is if you draft, like they don't know what the good cards are. They don't know what makes a good card, and they have to read all the cards, and it just is really boring. If you want to draft with like, you know, the new player, you can expect to sit there for like hours and hours and hours as they read cards and try and figure out what everything does. It's just not going to be fun, so you shouldn't do it, right? Like, draft is for more experienced players. Just play constructed. All right? Play, like I said, be friendly. Like, don't be a dick. Like, don't card shark them, or I guess they probably wouldn't have any cards, so you can't card shark them, but don't like laugh at them when you like blow them up or set them up for failure or something like that. Go easy on them. I also play like free mulligans the first time, so like, because I want them to get an optimal hand. So I just let them keep drawing hands of 7 until they get something good. No one wants to get mana flooded on their first game of Magic ever, right? Or mana screwed. So if they get like bad draw, whatever, let's just do, infinite mulligans, unlimited mulligans until you get something good, and then we'll play like that. Give real advice, right? Like, so a lot of times people like, they'll be like, oh, well, what do you think about this? Or, they'll be like, well, you should play this. And then, haha, I blew up your piece. Like, this isn't the time for like, intellectual masturbation where you're like going to like go and like blow your opponent away just to make yourself feel good. I don't know. I've seen people do that. Those are the kind of people that like, would play one-on-one basketball against like a 5-year-old and, be rejecting them and talking trash to them and stuff like that. Like, I always try and listen to Wheaton's Law is just don't be a dick. All right. The other thing is I also allow infinite take backsies. So if they make a bad play or they misplay something, then I would say like, let's say they swing into like, they've got a whole bunch of 1/1s, they swing into your 2/2s, and normally you would just block them all and kill them all. But I'd be like, hey, like, look what's going to happen here, right? Like, I'm going to do this and, you're going to lose like half your creatures, right? Like, are you sure you actually want to do that? And then let them take it back if they want to, right? And they'll be like, oh, I didn't see that, right? And be like, yeah, you get used to seeing that, but, let them take it back. Like I said, it's their first match. And another thing is don't worry about all the phases, all right? So, like, there's a lot of phases. Like, they'll be like, what's your upkeep? I'm like, okay, your upkeep's just the beginning of your turn. Don't worry about it. Like they'll forget to untap. They'll forget when they can play lands, stuff like that. They'll think that their creatures can directly attack your creatures, like stuff like that. Don't worry about it. What I always tell them is like, begin your turn, untap all your stuff, right? Play a land if you have one, then go to attacks. And then if you have something else you can play after the attacks, then play something like that and then end your turn, right? And really, those are the essential phases. Like, you don't want to be like, well, hey, you're supposed to declare this after declare combat, after declare attackers, and, now it's in declare blockers, so you can't do it anymore, or whatever, right? Like, don't worry about priority or the stack or anything like that. Just keep it simple, right? Because, like, there's just so many rules in Magic. It's going to be super intimidating if you try and bring them out like right away. All right. So you kind of give them, keep, like I said, just go easy on them. So after you play your hands open deck, then keep the same decks and play again. So show them like how to shuffle, whatever. Let them play again, like this time hands closed so they can't see it, and then play it out and just see how it goes. Like, talk them through it. Give them real advice again, like, and play as if you didn't know what's in their hand. So, like, for instance, they'll say, like, well, I don't know how this Elvish Archdruid works or this Heritage Druid works or something. So go back and explain it, but then play as if you didn't know, right? Like, you can be like, oh, now that I have, now that I know you have this, I'm going to hold up this lightning bolt or something like that, and, and crush it as soon as it comes out. Like, don't metagame, like, just assume you didn't know and let them play on. And again, it'll just make a better experience for them. And then by like the third match, they'll get used to playing that deck, and then they'll get used to how your deck works, and it'll just go smoother and smoother. And then what will happen is they'll get more interested in different decks, and you say like, okay, these are what we call like aggro decks. So let's take a look at a different kind of deck, and show them like a mill deck or a control deck, or like, people love mill, especially newbies. I love mill too. But, or show them 8-rack, talk, and you can do like another one. Okay, so let's do 8-rack versus mill, and you can talk about the difference between card advantage and milling someone's library. So discard and mill. You can talk about which one you think is better and so on and so forth, right? And slowly you can bring people into the game. And what you'll find is that just depending on their personality, they're going to have like, different types of decks that they like. Like, I know some players, they just hate the artwork on black. They just see, like, most of the black cards look really grim and macabre, you know, and so they don't want to, like, you know, they don't want to play black. It's not their style. You know, instead they want to play, you know, white or red or something like that. You know, like, I introduced Norn Sisters to one of these people, and as soon as they saw it, they're like, "That's the one I want to play. I love that deck archetype. That looks, you know," they didn't say archetype, but they're like, "I love that deck. That looks awesome. That's the one I want to play." And I was like, you know, it's competitive, but you're probably not going to win any tournaments. And they're like, "I don't care. That's the one I want." It's, you know, and I'm like, okay, well, you can slowly work towards getting it, you know, like, it's going to cost you a little bit of money, but, you know, as far as modern decks goes, it's not that expensive, and it won't rotate, you know, so you can have a lot of fun with it. You know, let them find the style that they want and explore. And like I said, I'm fortunate because I've got so many modern decks. Like, I've got like a ton of different ones that, that players can try out. And I let them play it out. You know, I tell them, of course, like, you know, don't damage my cards or anything like that, you know, but, you know, it's overall, it creates a good experience for them. The last thing I want to say is a good idea is to give them a deck, right? Because it's often intimidating to walk into an LGS. Like, I remember my first time, you know, I went in and you just have no idea what's going on. You're just, you know, and if they go to an LGS, they're going to get a starter deck, you know, probably, which is, you know, it's okay. But I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of starter decks. I know some of you guys are. If you do have ideas about it, like, put it into the comments. But for instance, at my LGS, the dual decks are currently on sale or clearance. I guess they couldn't get rid of them. And they had Blessed versus Cursed for $15 and Jace versus Vraska for $10. And this is Canadian dollars because I live in Canada. So that would be like Jace versus Vraska for like $6 American dollars. Right? And like Blessed versus Cursed for like, you know, 11 or 12 American dollars. You know, like something like that. It's ridiculous. That's like super, super cheap. Like in Blessed versus Cursed, they have a foil Geist of Saint Traft that's worth like almost more than that. You know, so if you just like bought that, sold the Geist, you would probably make your money back. You know, and you can keep all the other cards. The other one is the Jaces versus Vraska. There's a Remand in there, right? Like, that's a great card to have. You know, so overall, like, it's kind of a cool deck that you can build around. You know, they're competitive with one another. So, for instance, in this case, there were 6 people I was introducing. You know, and you know, you can give them like, you know, like, each, like, you buy, you know, Blessed versus Cursed and, you know, a Jace versus Vraska, or maybe 2 of them or something like that, you know, and you're going to get, you know, for a small amount of money, it works out to like $5 per person, essentially, that, you know, you can get them a whole deck. It's competitive. They're all friends, so they can play these decks against each other. They can see what the mirror matches look like. They can trade cards with each other because there's some overlap in the colors and stuff like that. And so overall, like, it just gives them a good experience, you know, so giving them the cards. And then usually, if I can, I like give them a set of sleeves as well. Not KMC Hypermats or anything like that, but, you know, a nice set of Ultra Pros with, like, you know, some artwork on it or something like that is always nice too. Now, of course, you're probably, like, I'm not like Mr. Moneybags either, but it's kind of a nice thing to do. And those people will probably do that for someone else either. Like, most long-term Magic players have like a whole pile of like random sleeves that, you know, that they've tried out and then they stop using or whatever. And new players aren't going to mind using, you know, getting a set of used sleeves and a used dex box or something like that. You know, it's just nicer overall and gives them, you know, something that they can take home. And I bet you, you know, they'll take it home and look through the deck. They'll like they'll lay out all the cards and see, like, try and figure out how they work, you know, and, you know, it just makes them like the game. And they're like, cool, you know, I was interested in this game. I got a free deck, you know, like, I'm able to play with my friends. It was a lot of fun. You know, I feel accepted, you know, and that's how you bring players into the game. Right? So anyways, that's just my little ramble about advice for getting people new to the game into the game. If you have any other advice, and this is a seriously important one, I'm going to make a lot of videos on this, I think. If you've got other advice, then throw it into the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Anyways, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.